Okay. Well, let's see. We've got the famous five today. Have we any apologies, official apologies from other committee members?
Yes, Chair. So we've had Councillor Chris Evans and Councillor Whitcutt.
Right. Okay. And perhaps a few might join us later on. You never know. Perhaps having trouble getting on, because we should have Matthew as well, shouldn't we? And maybe Carmel and there we are. Right. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting then. Now let's have a look. Let's have a go. Right, so I'll go through them. Page 3. Is anything on page 3? Happy with that? Yeah. Page 4. 5. 6. What do we know? Page 7. No, all happy. Sorry. Oh. That's not a gesture to me, James, no?
No, it wasn't a gesture to you, sorry.
I thought you were saying wind it back. Where were we? Page 8. Page 9.
Yes, Chair, I've got just something I'd like to question on page 9, please.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember this. I was at the last meeting. I don't remember this being discussed. And the committee asked the following in the first paragraph there. Member of the committee expressed concern that the Civic Centre is a wonderful historic centre and argued it would be inappropriate for staff working at the Civic Centre to have members of the public walking around. I don't remember a comment which would indicate that members of the public would just be walking around. Does anybody remember in what context that comment would have been recorded in that way?
Could I have said something about if we sort of farm out the Civic Centre for other use, what we're going to do with the Firebush murals? I think I might have said something along those lines.
Right, okay.
But as regards people wandering around, I don't think any member or myself had it. Actually, fair play, I don't think anybody said, you know, anything about that. But I think the issue of security was raised, that if we were thinking of farming out to third parties, they would have access maybe to areas where there might be sensitive material. I think I've got a recollection of that.
Charles, sorry, it's James. Yeah. Can I just jump in and say, I may have it wrong, but wasn't that about if we sort of had an open day process or something like that? We sort of said, for a meet and greet, come and meet your councillors and stuff. Was that not that?
I don't think it was. I know there was a meet and greet thing.
But I think that was concerns about the public coming in or not. Have I got the wrong end?
I think it was, no, I think it was about the idea of farming out the building to other parties, and the meet and greet was another topic, I think. But I mean, I couldn't swear to it. Gail.
Yeah, Chair, just to say, I mean, members of the public have always been welcomed into the Civic Centre. And we have groups that come in, schools that come in, youngsters. So we wouldn't want to give the impression that the public isn't welcome. So I think perhaps the wording needs to be looked at then.
Yes.
And I think perhaps the point that you're making is that it needs to be, and has always been done, in a very organised fashion. Because to be fair, apart from anything else, you can get easily lost in the Civic Centre, as we all have, no doubt, many a time. So it probably needs some rewording, in the sense of safety for the public, and for particular areas of the building. But I would hope we would always give the impression that members of the public are certainly welcome at the Civic Centre, but it would be by appointment, obviously, to come through from reception. That's my feeling about it.
Yeah. Indeed.
I mean, my feeling is one of my great regrets is that you know, it is a public building which is maintained and was bought through public funding. And yes, people should be able to feel free to go up there. You know, in addition to all the sort of democratic representation, which they should be expecting to be able to access it for, you know, and I very much welcome the day when council meetings and committee meetings will be free again for the public to attend on the premises.
Could I suggest that you ask the clerk to review the recording, see what was actually said, and liaise with you about the minute?
Yeah, okay, we'll do that if our officers could follow up on that. And
yeah, we'll pick that up, Chair. I think that's right. I think Councillor Clark was right. There was a similar comment, but on a different item regarding having people in the building as standing candidates for the next elections and encouraging people to be councillors. But I think Councillor Giles is right. I think we've tried to summarise a much broader debate there, and probably it's inaccurate the way it's worded. We'll look at the wording of that.
Right. Okay. So that's where were we? Page 9, wasn't it? I'll press on then. Let's see. Hang on. Let's get this thing to roll. Page 10. Page 11. 12. And I think that's it. So apart from that point on page 9, we're all content with the minutes, yeah? Yeah. Okay, that's lovely. There we are. So now please bear with me because I jotted down our agenda, and I make the next thing. I've got it down as annual report, head of services, item 4. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And who's going to lead on that?
Well, I'll introduce it, Chair, because I've taken the liberty of doing it again this year, even though it's going to be Leanne's responsibility from now on. But of course, Leanne took up her post as head of Democratic Services sort of halfway through this current year. So I've taken the liberty of doing a first draft of this, and it's a joint effort, if you like, between myself and Leanne. This is the annual report that we have to present to you as a committee, and it's a precursor to your next report, which is your annual report for the year, and it's for the period from November to November. So it's slightly out of sync with financial years because you tend to report to council every November. So that's the first point. This is the period from last November up to this October, and it's just an update really in terms of where we are with the Democratic Services staffing arrangements and support to you as a committee and as members. We have to report annually on the resources available to us in terms of supporting you to discharge your role as Democratic Services Committee and as backbench members effectively. Obviously, the good news this year is Leanne is now in post as the Democratic Services Manager and Head of Democratic Services. The 2 scrutiny advisors are now in post following a lengthy delay during the recruitment process during the COVID lockdown. So at the moment, we're pleased to report there's a full complement of staff. Obviously, there's still slight turnover within the team, but at the moment, Leanne has a full complement of staff, and you know the view is that we have sufficient resource and capacity within that team to provide effective support for you as a committee. Yeah. That's obviously subject to review. If things change in terms of the council's policy or approach, or if there are new initiatives that need to be looked at, then we'll need to keep that structure and the capacity under review. But at the moment, our view is that team, now we're up to a full complement of staff, should be sufficient to enable us to support you in discharging the role of this committee. So that's the first part of the report. The second part is perhaps a reflective view of what the team have been doing in the last 12 months, and I look forward to the next 12 months in terms of priorities. I mean, certainly for the last 12 months, as you know, the main priority for the team has been the establishment of these remote meetings, both in terms of the technical side, setting up the team's function to allow you to meet today in the way that you're meeting, and also training for members. I think there's an acceptance that's an ongoing process. Certainly, and you'll get a report on this later on in the agenda in terms of where we are now with the hybrid meetings. But the priority now for the next sort of 6 to 8 months, certainly up to next May and up to the elections, will be to meet that transition from where you are now with the fully remote meetings to supporting you to have the hybrid meetings. So that, yes, once the building is back in occupation, that we can have people meeting in the meeting rooms physically face to face, but other members will be able to dial in remotely as well. So we'll have the hybrid or multi-location meetings that the legislation requires. So that's the priority for the team between now and next May, as well as helping you deliver the rest of your work programme for the next 12 months. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Thank you, Gareth. Good to see you, Trevor. Did you have trouble getting in? You're muted, my old friend. Sorry.
I had a delivery of an oven. I was trying to get through a door.
Oh, I see.
So I had to take the door off.
Oh, good to see you. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see with these hybrid meetings. Would being there in person carry more weight? That remains to be seen, doesn't it? I think in the influence of meetings. I'm a bit sceptical, but I'm maybe a bit of a traditionalist in still preferring a face-to-face meeting. But there we are. We shall see what happens.
Just to come back on that, Chair, that's the one fundamental thing that can't happen with remote meetings or with hybrid meetings. What we've got to ensure is that people who dial in remotely have the same rights and ability to participate, so they're not disadvantaged in any way. And this is the whole idea of having that hybrid system set up properly. And it's not just a question of the technology. Chairing the meeting will require different skills as well. We're conscious of that in terms of members' training and development needs. But yes, the whole idea is, because this will be a matter of personal choice. At the moment, we're not in the building for health reasons, for restriction reasons in terms of people's safety. Going forward, it's not a question of safety, but personal choice. And therefore, to have that freedom of choice, you can't be disadvantaged in any way if you're dialing in remotely, because for whatever reason, whether it's work related or other commitments, you simply can't get to the council chamber at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. So the one thing that we are clear about in terms of the technology and the protocols for these meetings is that members who are dialing in remotely cannot be disadvantaged in any way, either in terms of speaking, voting, or in terms of their role in those committees.
Any other comments, members?
If I might, Chair, picking up on Gareth's point, will there have to be a reason given for remote working, or is it just a personal choice and I decide that I don't want to come to the civic centre?
It's purely personal choice going forward. Okay. It's this requirement of hybrid meetings is part of the Welsh Government diversity equality agenda. It's to make sure that the councillors who've got other work and care commitments, say, who can't just travel into the civic centre for whatever reason, are able to dial in remotely. But it's purely a matter of personal choice. You don't have to apologise for not being, in attendance in the meeting, because that remote attendance counts and will be as much an attendance as it would be if you were sat in the council chamber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Gareth did explain this to us in a standards committee sometime before pandemic, and I felt it was a retrograde step when people don't get together. But obviously we've got to comply with the legislation. Thank you, Gareth.
Gail, did you raise your hand?
I did, yes, yeah. Thanks, Chair. I just want to say it's good to hear the success of the reorganisation, Gareth, and to have all the staff you require, which is hasn't been so easy as it at some points. So I congratulate everyone on their posts there. And I suppose just a remark about the the virtual attendance, hopefully that could increase attendance, couldn't it, as well? Because not everyone can get in, and I think if there's that mix, it gives more opportunity for people to attend in that way as well. So I can see there's a lot of thought going into ensuring how that would work and as equity, of access. So I think it's a good thing myself, as long as it works well, like everything else.
Anybody else? No?
Yeah, Charles, it's James. I'll put my hand up if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's not really a question. I mean, it's more. I think, like Gail has just sort of said, it's more sort of a well done. I think we've been through COVID, or we're in COVID, or coming out, wherever you want to position it, and to get the full staff on board and to do what you've done in the year from November to November, and I know we're looking at the hybrid meetings in the future, but I think you have to reflect back on the year we've had with the virtual meetings, and I think where we started, or last November, to where we are and how it's conducted, and in Charles's favour and the other chairs, sort of how the chairs have sort of got on top of these virtual meetings, and how I believe it's a lot easier to come on and we're more used to it. I think in reflection, sort of, it's been a good job by everyone. So a thank you, really, and it's great to have everyone on board and all the positions filled.
Right. Okay. All done. Okay. So that brings us.
Charles, I got my hand up.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
No, I think it's a good idea, but long as the system works properly, as the other councillors have said, I'm all for it. It gives that opportunity for somebody who's unable to get to the civic centre for any reason. Then it gives them the opportunity to dial in from home or from work, even there, to that effect. Providing the system works properly, and I'm going to say the positive effect it gets, then I got no problem at all.
Right, that's good. Yeah, and encouragingly, although I'm a bit of a technophobe, I mean, things do seem to be improving, and they do seem to be workable. Although I just polished my glasses now, so I'll be able to see when people have got their hands up. There we are. Right. I think that more or less deals with that topic. So that will then bring us on to the annual report for democratic services.
Thanks, Chair. That one's with me. So I'll just share my screen, and hoping to give the committee an update on the participation strategy that we talked about last time we met, and how we're incorporating some of the feedback the committee have given to us, and a bit of information about the timeline and the next steps. Okay, can everybody see my slides?
No.
Sorry, Chair, I think we may have skipped an item, Leanne.
Oh, okay.
We've got the annual report of Democratic Services Committee first.
Yeah, that should be us.
Before the, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, what we've picked up is the head of Democratic Services annual report, but there's another annual report which is the committee annual report.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Okay, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
That's item 5 on your agenda. So yeah, I think Leanne's item is item 6.
Yeah. But it concludes that we're all a jolly bunch and we get on quite well together. So
yeah, that's the one. In essence, that's what the report says, Chair. If you're happy to say that to council, that's fine.
Well, there we are. That's it. Again, it sort of reviews what we've done over the year. Do we want to go through it or?
Well, it's a draft that we've prepared for you, Chair. This is the committee's report, so it's a question of whether you're happy with this. You're quite right. This is an annual report that you present to council on the work of the committee in the last 12 months, on your work programme for the next, well, we say 12 months, but effectively it's up until next May, when there'll be a sort of rebasing and review of all the priorities anyway. So yes, what we've included there is details of membership and your activities and work programme for the last 12 months, which touches on a lot of the work that that Leanne is going to update you on in the next item, in terms of preparing for the implementation of the new legislation. So no, unless members have got any particular questions, it's just really an issue of whether you're happy with the content of that report and that going forward to council as your annual report.
To me, it seemed a fair appraisal. I just wondered, does it meet with everybody else's acceptance? If you've gone through it, couldn't add, couldn't detract. It seemed all right to me. Yeah.
Page 32, Chair, if I might.
So hang on, let's have a look. Page 32. Where are we? Hang on, page 32.
Yeah, there's half a paragraph, and then the second full paragraph down. The committee felt that the proposed induction programme of training and competency was comprehensive.
Yeah.
But there was concern about the intensity of the training, with 37 modules being developed. Are we concerned about the training? I don't recall us ever having a discussion and saying we thought there was too much training.
Well, it was minuted as such, Chair. I mean, I don't think that was the general view. I think was that the induction programme was welcome, and so I think it was Councillor Matthew Evans who was concerned about the numbers of training courses. Like I said, there was about 37 modules on there. And I think the main thing was to identify those that were mandatory and those that were specific to individual roles. So that was, I think there was concern that members might think they'd have to undertake all sort of 37 modules, and that wasn't the case. So I think although there was initially concern, I think we explained it in the rest of the item that members didn't have to attend all, and they just needed to attend the ones that A, were mandatory, or B, were relevant to their particular role, whether it's as chair of committee or members of a particular committee.
So through you, Chair, do we feel that paragraph adequately sums up what Gareth just said?
Well, I think we could put in the fact that could add to it that these aren't mandatory. It's participation of all the modules is not mandatory.
Well, the remaining part of the paragraph actually says that, Chair.
Oh, sorry, pardon me. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm content with that. How does everybody else feel? Yeah, Gail? Yeah, you're for it. Yeah, okay, fine. Right, okay.
Chair, can I? If nobody else has got, I seem to remember this was actually about sort of the complexity. You know, we know that after May there will be new councillors joining the council at that point. They won't have, they're not going into post with a lot of insight into these things, and it's just the complexity. It needs to be very clearly explained and full support given to those councillors to take up those training opportunities as is most appropriate to the roles and their needs.
Yeah, so it's could we rephrase that in that of course this is optional given the experience of the given councillors. Really, they wouldn't be any need for them to go over old ground they learned maybe in their first years. Yes,
but I mean, all measures must be taken to avoid this appearing to be over complex. A simplified route map of how to engage with this training.
We're happy to take on board that going forward. This is more a reflective look in terms of the debate that took place last time. I think Councillor Thomas's comments are quite opposite, and I think going forward, because this will be part of your work programme now for the next sort of 6 to 8 months. The programme of induction training for members is still being developed, and clearly there are messages that we can still sort of feed back to councillors and potential elected members in terms of that training programme. So happy to take on board Councillor Thomas's comments, but maybe going forward, this is more a reflective view in terms of what you discussed at that particular committee meeting.
So I propose we let this stand, the text stand as it is, and then, but of course, bear in mind the comments that the points that Kate has made.
Or possibly, we could pick that up in, because obviously we'll write a form of words for you to introduce this in council. And if you feel strongly about it, that may be something that you could just reinforce in your introductory comments in council itself.
Yeah.
Gareth, can I say, I mean, you know, when I was elected nearly 10 years ago, training at that point was very sparse. So this is, you know, something of great significance that has been introduced in the last 2 administrations. You know, and we're proposing something which is even more packed in terms of upskilling our councillors. So, you know, maybe some reference to that can be made. You know, it's quite a culture shift.
Yeah, it certainly is. I'd agree with that, and maybe this new technology is what facilitates the a broader degree of training or availability of training. But there we are.
Yes, certainly echo those comments, Chair. I mean, member training and development was very much in its infancy, you know, a couple of council administrations ago. But it's been developed significantly since then, and certainly for the last 2 induction programs, they've been fairly intensive. And the next one for next May is going to be far more intensive again, as people, I think, develop more into their roles, and we can identify what specific skill sets members need. You know, we talked about role descriptions for members, for example, in terms of the skills that are required for individual roles, not just being a councillor generally. So I think that process of identifying and developing members' skills and training, that's been intensified greatly over the last sort of 10 years. We hope to take it a stage further. I think the introduction of e-learning has helped, because it means that people don't have to come into the Civic Centre again every time for a training session. But I think some of the comments of committee last time were that sometimes you need that face-to-face training, because that interaction is better than just doing an e-learning module yourself. So I think it's getting the balance right in terms of how we deliver the training, as well as identifying what that training requirement is.
Right. Okay. Content with that one and all? Well, Gail, sorry, you muted, Gail.
Yeah, sorry, I put my hand up, I think. Or was that the annual report? I've done it again for you. I was just going to say, well, I remember 18 years ago, of course, when there was, I don't think, any training at all. I mean, Trevor was probably there then, I can't remember. So it's been huge improvement, and it's something actually that I think, you know, we talk about new cohorts coming in, but at that time, a lot of us came in from professional backgrounds, and it was something that we picked up then. So there was a push then to introduce it, and it's really, you know, it's really good to see how it's developed. I think being able to pick and choose is a really good idea, and I think the comment you were making about those, you know, that have been long-standing experienced councillors, it can be off-putting if you're starting from scratch with something and having to go through it all again. So a more sophisticated system, I think, is really good. I think, Gareth, you were just talking about online modules or in person. I just wonder whether there's something in between with that. So that, you know, maybe, you know, that, again, that's more complex. I'm not an expert on this, but where you could have sessions that people can come into, like a committee meeting, so you don't actually have to be in person, you know, because there will always be issues around people not being well, or whatever other their circumstances are. And I just think if you could have meetings that were mixed with training as well, you don't actually have to be there. And again, it goes back, I think, to the attendance issue and you know, that equity. So, but all in all, it sounds like it's really good to me. Thanks.
Trevor, you.
On that final point, Chair, in terms of what Councillor Giles, yes, once the council chamber is set up for hybrid meetings, then we could provide training on that basis. So take, for example, mandatory code of conduct training for all members. We could hold that in the council chamber for those members who are able to come in, but then use the hybrid facility for members who, for some reason, are unavailable to dial in remotely. So I think that hybrid meeting facility takes the delivery of the training to a different level, and it does avoid those issues about availability, because yes, not all members are available either during the working day or sometimes in the evenings for training sessions, and admittedly some of these sessions can go on for half a day, even a day sometimes. So yeah, hybrid meeting technology I think opens up a whole new world in terms of how we deliver the training, and it's back to personal choice again.
Trevor, you had your hand up.
Yes, Chair. I think it's a good idea, but it needs to be ongoing throughout the period of the council's period as such, because obviously committees change over a period of time after 2 or 3 years. So that ongoing training could be specific to somebody else. I'm thinking about planning in particular. When I rejoined planning, I had to go through the training on the planning system again. But obviously, if somebody new comes into that 3 years down the line of the new term, then they need to go into that training again. And that applies to any committee that's needed that extra training.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, I agree entirely with that, Chair. I mean, obviously we're focused on the induction programme of training for new members come May, because obviously with a new intake of members, there'll be a lot of intensive training there, just in terms of getting them up to speed in terms of how the council's decision making works, for example, quite apart from planning and licensing training and so on. But Councillor Watkins' point is absolutely right. And this is a role obviously for committee going forward in terms of members' individual training and development needs. That should be constant. It's not just a month after next May in terms of induction. Members' roles within the council might change. If somebody becomes a new chair of committee, for example, then they will require specialist training in terms of the skills of chairing committees. Those skills, as we said earlier, will be different if you're chairing hybrid meetings. So I think what we're keen to develop is something that this committee has touched on previously, are sort of almost individual training and development plans for members, a bit like we do with council staff, where you almost have a performance review every year and you try and identify where your learning needs are and what you need to develop as an individual. Mm-hmm. And it would be good, I think, to actually look at those as for individual councillors, so that applying Councillor Watkins' point going forward, they've got a training and development plan over a 4 or 5 year period. It's not just for a 4 or 5 weeks following their election as a councillor. So I think that's something you could usefully look at as a committee in terms of developing members' training and development plans.
I wonder what sort of role would you see mentoring of councillors in with this sort of guidance of committee changes and things like that? I know we've got a sort of a concept of mentoring for new councillors coming in, but mentoring could, like education, be a lifelong thing maybe.
I think mentoring is an essential part of training and development, certainly for new councillors. And we would welcome that in terms of more senior members. I think, as Councillor Giles mentioned, in the old days, as it were, that mentoring was critical, because that was probably the only development, apart from some of the basic training that we delivered, that was the only development that members actually received back in those days. But I wouldn't underestimate the value of that mentoring by more senior members. Now, I think particularly in terms of the representational role, we can equip members for being a member of planning committee like Councillor Watkins, or licensing committee, or even chairs of scrutiny in terms of questioning skills. But I think mentoring comes in where a member is developing their role in the community in terms of that representational role as community leaders and what you do in the wards. So that's where I think it would be critical, because clearly that's something that we as officers can't get involved with or can't replicate, because we're not involved in that ward work. So I think that's where mentoring by more senior members becomes critical.
Right. Now we're up to page 32 on the report. I'll press on. I think we only got a couple more pages to go. Were there any other points that people wanted to raise? We got about another 6 pages of this report. No? So I assume that we're happy with the report as it stands, yeah? Okay. So that brings us on now to Leanne, doesn't it, for our participation strategy.
Thanks, Chair. Trying to share my slides again. I don't know if you can see that.
Let's have a look. I can, but I think it's going to be rather small.
Okay, so hopefully if I talk you through it, and I'll share the slides with the committee after the meeting. So just a bit of a refresh. Last time we met, we talked about the participation strategy, which is a requirement under the Local Government and Elections Act for all councils in Wales to have. So this is a duty on local authorities to have a policy or strategy in place that encourages local people to participate in government decision making, local gov decision making, and consult and share that strategy by May next year, so 2022. So the key requirements under the participation strategy, there were 5, and the one that we're focusing on today is around promoting how to become a member of the council or a related authority. So last time the committee gave a bit of feedback, so I just wanted to talk through how that's going to look as part of the overall timeline. So the strategy is in development at the moment. There should be a working document available ready for December. At that point, the document will come back to the Democratic Services Committee for review and comment. Any changes and amendments will be made, and then we'll go out to consult with the public in February. So the feedback the committee had on consultation has been considered as part of that. So we will try and think of other strategies in a safe way that we can get it out further to residents. So not just about being online, we'll try and cast the net a lot wider than that. We'll also be working with some of the groups in the city that might be harder to reach and don't have as much of a voice with the council. So we'll do the consultation, gather all the evidence and outcomes from that, and present that to full council then in March, ready in time for that strategy to be published in May. And this will form part of the induction training that we've talked about today. So important for members, but also to share that with the public and with our officers as well, so everybody's aware of any changes. We have started to do some work on this because thinking about elections for next year, we do need to start making a move on encouraging participation for members or potential members. So we've updated our website page to reflect the latest information. So the WLGA has published some really good information about how to being a councillor, not just how to become a councillor, but what that entails, what that feels like, what that looks like. So those changes are already up on our own council web pages. There's a link to the WLGA website and there's a link to the Be a Councillor website. There is a short film there, which I hoped I could show you a bit of today, but I can't get the sound to work, unfortunately. So I would recommend going and having a look at that. It's about 8 minutes long. And it is just the experience of councillors being shared there. So it's quite interesting. So the next steps then, going back to the timeline, is we'll develop a communication plan to promote where to access this information on how to become a councillor, so we're getting that message out there. We will finish that first draft of the strategy, and then we'll be coming back to the committee in December to share that with you. And that was all for my presentation. I think the only other item that I had on the agenda does link into this, so sorry, Chair, if I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So we have talked about members' roles already today. So I think what we would look to do is share that with the committee again, just to understand if there were any further comments that we would want. Thanks, Chair. That was me. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Leanne? Gail. You're on mute, Gail. Oh.
Apologies, Chair. yeah, just to say, you know, it looks very good to me. I'm new to this, obviously newer than the other committee members, but I think it's you know, it's really good. Anything we can do, obviously, to encourage people to apply. Of course, you know, using these other ways where, you know, we've got videos and so forth that people like to view, has got to be a good thing. So I congratulate you on the work that you're doing, because I would imagine it's quite a lot of work with that, and I certainly look forward to you know, the catch up, the review later on, February, I think you said. But it seems like good work to me. I just wanted to say that, really.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll come and bring the initial strategy to you in December, and then we'll go back out for consultation. I think it'll be February, so that we've got a chance to do the budget consultation first. We're not overlapping. It gives it the best opportunity then to get as much feedback as we can get.
Could you send us the film, please, Leanne?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay.
It's on one of the links in my presentation, which I'll send to you. If you click on the page, and then it's embedded in the page as a video. Unfortunately, as I say, I couldn't share it through Team for some reason. Okay,
we look forward to seeing that, I'm sure. Right, are we all done on this topic, councillors? All content?
Yes, Chair, just the fact that I wanted a copy of the presentation so I could get into the link, so you've answered the question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, lovely. Right, so so there we are. That's what have we got now? We've got participation strategy. We've also got role descriptions. We haven't covered that yet, have we?
Yeah, so that was, I know we've talked about this a little bit earlier in reference to one of the other agenda items, but I will reshare the role descriptions that have come from WLGA, and again thinking about what we're going to put in place ready for elections next year for May 2022.
Right. Okay, so that brings us on to happy days. We're all going to have a pay rise, aren't we?
Well, that's what the independent remuneration panel are recommending, Chair. This is their draft report. If you remember, every year they issue their draft report around about October, November time, and they invite councillors to comment before they publish their final report, probably in January, February, in terms of the new allowances scheme that will then come into force. Well, next May in this case, it'll come into force when the new council is in place next May. So yeah, we've circulated a copy of the draft report. Normally you tend not to comment on how much, on the basis that that's really a matter for the remuneration panel to decide what is an appropriate level of payment for councillors. I don't think, you know, on a cursory glance of the draft report, it only came through, I think, last week, or you know, slightly earlier. What they are doing now is rebasing the allowances. So it, you know, in the last sort of few years, it's just been a relatively small inflationary allowance. What they're now saying is that because allowances, even the basic salaries, haven't kept pace with inflation over the past sort of 5 years, they're looking to rebase all of the allowances. So the basic salaries for councillors will go up, and so will the salaries for leaders in particular. And then all the other senior salaries for chairs of committee and the civic salaries for the mayor and so on will go up by a commensurate amount. So it's really only a question of whether you as a panel have got any comments that you wish to pass back to the IRP at this stage.
Any thoughts, members? Gail?
Thanks very much. I mean, it was it's so tricky for us, isn't it? This, you know, in the sense, and you know, of public opinion, you know, as politicians, it's difficult. And I know it mentioned in there about, you know, we don't you know, take all that we might be entitled to because we feel so very aware of it. But I think, you know, this independent assessment is, you know, is so important. The fact that it is independent and the comparisons that it takes, you know, within, you know, the community. And I think, you know, when this comes out, as it's thought out each time, it's about how that's presented to the public is really important, isn't it? You know, But the point is that it is independent view, and you know, that's what holds the weight. So you know, sounds good to me.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Gareth, you say you've sent us a copy of the draft report. I remember reading something a while back, but I'm not too sure about
it. Should have been sent out with the agenda, Chair.
Right, okay, then I more than likely read it on the agenda. The other thing is, will the committee be commenting on the report or not?
Well, that's what we're asking you. The report's before you if you want to comment.
Yes, but can we comment individually as well or not?
No, it is sent to the council for comment, and the council's procedure is for this committee to respond to the draft report. So no, it's not like some other consultation where individuals can respond. It's not public consultation. This is just the IRP consulting with each of the local authorities in Wales. So we can comment as a council if you like, and as is customary, it's within the remit of Democratic Services Committee to formulate any comments on behalf of the council at this stage.
Okay, so what is the timeline for making these comments, and can the committee make them?
Well, that's why it's before you today. I think that the consultation has to be in sometime in November. So this is the last collective committee meeting that we could bring it to. So if you want to formulate any collective comments, now would be the time to do it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I do have a does the panel think question. I was wondering, what do you think about the concept that we work a 3-day week? I think I got a grin from Trevor. Let's see. Do you think we do more? I think we do. Sorry, Trev, you're on mute, and Kate has a hand up.
A lot more, be quite honest, Chair.
Yeah. And Katie, you had your hand up, did you?
Well, I certainly agree with a lot more, and certainly, you know, councillors' roles certainly fall outside normal working hours. I think that we will all experience that. My personal best is somebody ringing me at 3:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And yes, it's extraordinary. And for people who aren't councillors, they would be truly amazed at the amount of effort that we do put into it and the innovative ways in which we all find to give the service that we feel appropriate, you know, in the role.
In some ways, saying we need danger money might be a bit over dramatic, but I think we need sort of mental health money. You know, I mean, it's a job with stresses, isn't it? Yeah, there we are. So all content, or sorry, Gail?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, following on from Kate's comments, and also if you tie it into attracting people into the role. So if you look at remuneration, I think 3 days doesn't give that flexibility that's very attractive to most people. Now, if you were going to talk hours, but then even then, it's quite tricky, isn't it? Because you'll have, you know, some weeks you are flat out, and then you put all the meetings in and everything else, and then there may be other weeks that are a little bit quieter. I'm still waiting for my quiet time, but there you are. It's only been 18 years, but so I think anything that sounds like an employment of certain days, I don't think fits to me with the role. Yeah. It is about that flexibility and being available. You know, you're not an emergency service. That's what I say to some people as well. I mean, you know, you don't want people getting worn out and totally stressed out. But you know, I think it would be with some caution to set out specific number of days or hours, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do you think we should make some sort of representation on that score, Gareth? Would that be feasible? Or would we query the length of time that it's based?
Yeah, just to be clear on that, I don't think the IRP is saying a councillor only works 3. What they're doing is using that as some base, if you like, for what is an appropriate level of, they call it salary, but it's an allowance, isn't it? It used to be an old councillor's allowance. So, I mean, it's up to you whether you want to comment on that maybe the sort of the analysis or comparison with a part-time role and the equivalent average part-time salary is the right one, because I suppose that the issue then is they've got to base the assessment of allowances on something. So if they don't base it on that, what should they base it on? And that's a pretty sort of fundamental review in terms of how then they would assess what is a reasonable allowance. But to be clear, the IRP are not saying that any councillor only works a part-time week. That's not the case. I think they recognise being a councillor is a full-time role, but the equivalent salary they're saying should be equivalent to part-time earnings on an average salary basis.
As chair, I was just going to say, I mean, it just comes back. I suppose I'm thinking of it in how the public will view this. So how we word it and how that message gets across, because they don't realise that. They don't realise the moderate income that backbenchers have, or that is based on part-time work. So I can see how it's based on that. It's just how we may want to some way word it with communications that we have. I think that's what I'm trying to say, as opposed to the actual report.
Right. So shall I take it that we're more or less content to let this this carry on, and it's with no comment on the remuneration? Are we all content that we run with that? Yeah, a few heads nodding. Yeah, we're all okay. Yeah, so I think we're happy on that then, Gareth. Yeah, and in terms of Councillor Giles's point, that in terms of that being a sort of separate issue, that is something I think in terms of the messages that being and the information being passed on to potential councillors is part of the previous item that you discussed about getting information out there about what it means to be a councillor. And don't just think that because you get paid £16,000 that it's only a 3-day-a-week job. So I think that's more about messaging in terms of people coming into the role and their understanding of the roles and responsibilities of being a councillor, rather than going back to the IRP and saying they should rebase their figures on something else. So yeah, happy to proceed on that basis if committee are happy. Yep, happy on that then. Right, so I think that brings us on to the date of the next meeting, doesn't it, Gareth? Yes, I think that concludes your agenda, which is the 17th of February 2022. And that leaves me with I think a historic role at this precise moment. I think I'm going to be the first committee chairman to wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Sorry, Chair, didn't Leanne say that we had a meeting before Christmas?
Yeah, I was just about to say that myself, Councillor Hooray.
Belay that then, as they say.
we might need to fit in another meeting because of that consultation on the public participation strategy. Right. I don't know whether Leanne can clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't got a date yet, but we will look to send something out today. Would that be okay, Chair?
Happy with that? All happy? Yeah.
And you can delay your Christmas message then.
Indeed. Gosh, in the good old days, I would have brought in a packet of mince pies. You can't do that by remote control, can you? Right. Well, thank you all for your attendance. I think we've given it a fair thrash this morning, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's been a good debate. I hope everybody feels the same way. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for attending. All the very best.